All right, everybody, I just want to walk through the Excel 1 assignment today. So we're going to do three different things. We've got this data here. We're going to learn to do some calculations using cell references. We're going to learn about this little dollar sign here in our cell references. It's called an absolute cell reference. We're also going to learn about the autofill tool. And then over here, we're going to create our first chart. So if I click in one of these, they're called cells. I notice here in the upper left-hand corner, I can get the location of that cell. That's cell F5. So that means I'm in column F. I've got all these letters across the top. So these are my columns. And then on the side here, I see numbers. These are my rows. So where the column and row intersect, I get a cell value like D7. Where I click on a cell when I'm trying to perform operations is also important. So you'll notice right now my cursor's kind of looks like a big fat plus sign. If I put it right in the middle of a cell, it stays a plus sign. I left click and hold down, and now I can start highlighting. And you can see in that upper left-hand corner that showed me my cell location before. Now it shows I have 13 rows and 5 columns. Click on that same cell, but now I move to this little shaded box in the lower right-hand corner. If I put my cursor over that, now it looks like a crosshairs or a thinner plus sign, a little plus sign that lost some weight. I can left click and drag down, and that's called my autofill tool. And it'll take, if I have a value or a formula in that cell, it will drag it down to whichever, as far as I drag it down. And the last one, if I move my cursor right over one of the lines of the cell after it's been selected, now I get like arrows that point in each direction. And now I can left click and hold down, and I can actually drag that entire cell somewhere. So where you put your cursor is important when you're trying to do this. So we're going to do some calculations here. So the first one asks us to add cell C6, right? That's cell C6 to cell B6 in cell H6, which is right here. So there are a few different ways I can do it. Whenever I'm going to manually type out ask Excel to perform an equation or a calculation, first thing I'm going to do is hit the equal sign. And now I see there's a value of 1 plus 20 in those two cells, and I could just enter those values. This isn't what I want to do, but I'm just showing you. This is basically like using a calculator. We want Excel to be a little better than a calculator. So what I want to do, equal sign, is I want to left click on this cell C6, plus sign, left click on this cell D6, hit enter. The reason now I'm using cell references. If I come back to a cell where I've entered a formula, I can double left click. It'll highlight the cells I've referenced. I can see the formula. I can also see it here in the toolbar. Same, if I've got a formula that has values, I've entered an equation, I can come here to the Formula tab, the Formula Auditing menu, and I can trace its precedence. So the precedents are cells whose values were used in that equation. And the same, if I now did a calculation using this cell, I could trace its dependence. So and see all the different cells that have used these values, right? And they're responsible for the output of that. I'll remove those arrows. That's not as important, but being able to figure out which cells you reference, that is pretty important. I've also in the Home tab, I've got this auto sum tool. I could click on it. I could just reference my cells, hit enter. I could equal sign, the formula for adding cells together. If I do equal sign and I start typing out the name of a formula, and we'll practice this a little bit, and I left click on them one at a time, it gives me a definition. It tells me what it's going to do. So if I click on the sum formula, add all the numbers in a range of cells, that's what I want. Double click. Once I see equal sign, the formula, and then a parentheses and a flashing cursor, now I can left click. This tells me it's going to add together cell C6 through D6. Hit 21. I could also go into my formula tab. Maybe in math and trig functions, I could look up the sum function here. I'm not sure. There's the sum function. Reference my cells. Same thing. So lots of different ways to do this. And probably the most basic way, equal sign, left click on this cell plus left click on this cell, hit enter. Now we're going to keep doing the same thing. We got a couple subtract, multiply, divide. If I'm only adding together, two cells, this is probably subtracting two cells. This is how I'm going to do it. So equal sign, subtract cell C6 from D6. So first we would select D6, hit the minus sign, then we select C6, hit enter. Now we're going to multiply C6 by D6. So again, whenever I'm manually typing out a formula, an equation, first step, equal sign, left click on one. We're going to use, it kind of looks like the asterisk symbol. On your keypad, it's above the number 9. On your keyboard, it's above the number 8. Hit enter. And we're going to divide cell C6 by cell D6. So equals C6, we're going to use the backslash D6. So again, that's just manually. And the reason that we like to use cell references is because if you were actually doing this with some data you had and something changed, you were like, oh, this first number isn't supposed to be 1, it's supposed to be 7. We go in and change our number. And if we're using cell references, all of our calculations will update. So that's why we like to use cell references. And also, if we get good at it, I think it's faster than typing things out for most of us. All right, so next thing we want to do is we're gonna sum all of our values here in column C. So again, this is probably where I'm going to go to either the Home tab, go to my Auto Sum tool, or I'm going to go to my Formulas tab, use the Auto Sum tool. I can look it up here in my math and trig functions. I could go to the insert function and I can search for functions. So that f of x or this f of x will bring up the insert function dialog box here. I could search for the sum function. I could find it that way. Or I can just do equals. Once you get comfortable with this and you know what functions you're looking for some of the ones you used often, find the formula I want, left click one time. If I left click on it once, it gives me the definition. Double left click, it enters the formula, and I'm ready to select my data. Sum column C. All right. I'm going to select all my values in column C. Cursor right in the middle, big fat plus sign, left click and hold down. Got to get right to the end here. So C6 through C25, hit enter. Next, I'm going to sum column C plus column D. So lots of different ways to do this one. For this one, I'll go back and I'll use my auto sum tool. And I'll highlight this entire column. Hit enter. I could have done something. I could have done equals. I've already summed column C here, and then I could add. I guess it doesn't like that. Let me see if I can do it though. Plus. All right, I could enter the sum formula here. It wants to close the parenthesis for me. Yep. Okay. Easiest way to do this is probably just to go to the auto sum or just find your sum function, highlight all these cells. If you're having problem getting the correct range of cells, C6 through C25, you might be, when you finish your highlight, you might just jerk at the last second and do something like that. You need to make sure that you're finishing with that plus sign in the right cell, with your cursor in the right cell. Do that, hit enter. And the last one, we're going to take the average of column D. You know, adding these two together, doing this add, subtract, multiply, divide, probably not saving a lot of time for calculator from a calculator. Now when we're doing the sum and the average, we are. So we can do equals, type in AV. I see one here that says average. I left click on it once to get the definition. Returns the average, the arithmetic mean of its arguments. Yep, sounds good. Double click. Once I've entered that formula, I see my open parenthesis and a flashing cursor. I select my range of cells, hit enter. And that is the basics. So, you know, being able to type out an equals and just reference cells to do a calculation. Equals and searching out functions, to being able to enter those and reference your cells. And then being able to go into that formula toolbar and search for functions, or to be able to look in these drop-down menus and look those up. That's most of what we'll do in this class for calculations. And again, we always want to make sure we're using cell references, because if we don't, we figure out one of our values changed. We need to change that 20 to 15. Everything else will automatically update itself. So quick lesson on calculations and just performing basic operations for calculations. The next one we want to learn about is using cell references in our autofill tool. So we want to multiply each number in column C, so each one of these numbers, by 5. And we're going to use relative and fixed addressing to do that. So enter the appropriate equation in the cells below. So we've got a column for relative cell references. We've got a column for fixed cell references. And then we're going to use our autofill tool to populate each column. So it shows us what we want here in cell N1. We've got this value of 5. So if we come to this first equation and I hit equals, I reference cell N1, multiplication symbol, I reference cell C6 and hit enter. I could do that one at a time. Now I want to multiply that 5 by C7, C8, C9. So I could do this one at a time. Equals this times. But I'm not moving very quickly here when I do that. I want to be able to use this. When I look at this equation here, I've got cell N1 times C6. What I want to be able to do is click on this cell and use my autofill tool and drag down these values. Drag down the equation. But what happens when I use my autofill tool is that when I drag a cell down, the number wants to change, right? 5 wants to become 6. When I've used a cell reference, 5 wants to become 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8. So I look, this was N1 times C6, perfect. I look at my next cell down when I use my autofill tool. This is N2 times C7. So I wanted 6 to become C6 to become C7, C8, C9. But I don't want my N1 to become N2, N3, N4 because there are no values there. Similarly, if I drag a cell across, now I notice the letter changes, right? If I drag cells across, C becomes D for my cell references. So C6 became D6, and then N1 became O1. So we're not going to, just for this exercise, we're not going to drag our equations across, but we do want to be able to drag them down. And I don't want to end up with all zeros here. So what I want to be able to do is use a fixed cell reference so that when I use my autofill tool, my cell references don't change. Some of them don't change. So equal sign, I'm going to select my cell N1 times C6 again. But now I have to think about what I want to change when I drag this down, when I use my autofill tool and drag down. Right, the number wants to change. N1 wants to become N2, N3, N4. I don't want that to change. So I'm just going to put a $ before the 1. I don't need to fix the N for this one because we're just dragging it down. But if you do, it doesn't make a difference. If I put the $ before the N, now when I drag it across, it won't change. If I put the $ before the 1, now when I drag it down, it won't change. Do I want to freeze anything for C6? As I drag down, I want C6 to become C7, C8, C9. All right, I'm not going to change anything there. So hit enter. I'm going to use my autofill tool. Now I can see I didn't end up with zeros. Let me see. All right. I still end up with my value of 5 here in cell N1 times C25. Perfect. So just what I wanted to do there. So now we can do some basic calculations using cell references. We know how to use our autofill tool. Have a basic understanding of a relative versus fixed cell references. Or when I put that $ in, that's an absolute cell reference. And if I start dragging those values around with or formulas around with my autofill tool, now they won't change. One more thing I want to practice is just creating charts. So for our charts, we're going to create a scatter chart. We are going to plot the data in column C on axis Y. So one thing I probably should have done in the very beginning is for all your assignments, you've got this naming convention. So first thing you should do when you start your assignments is name and save, and I should have done that at the beginning too. So this one's last name, first initial, Excel 1, and here's what it should look like when you're done. So I'm going to go ahead and go in here. I'll go to the File tab. I am going to save my file as. I'll choose my location. Save it here to the OneDrive for me, to my documents on my OneDrive. So I just want to make sure I know where to save it. And I am going to name my file Goodrich, last name, and Excel 1. Now I can see my files saved here. Everything's capitalized just the way it was in the naming convention. So my last job before I worked at Sinclair, worked in a consulting firm with 150 or so people, a lot of us working on the same projects. And we had naming conventions for all our files. And if we couldn't name our files correctly, then other people couldn't find them. Or you might be working on an older version of a file instead of the newest version. And it created a lot of problems. So make sure you understand how to name your files. And again, a good rule of habit is just to, first thing you do, name and save your file. Because now if you accidentally uh, close it down, your computer crashes or whatever happens, you've got your file saved. All right, so now we're going to create our scatter chart. If I go to the Insert tab, here are all my charts. I'm just going to insert. If I accidentally have something highlighted and I insert a chart, it'll plot that. So I usually make sure, I don't have anything selected. I just go to Insert, Charts. Here's my scatter chart. I'm going to do a scatter chart with smooth lines and markers. Stay away from anything. I don't know if these have them. Whenever it says clustered, whenever it says stacked, I'm sorry, avoid the stacked charts. I'll move my chart over here. I'll kind of get it to fit my box. All right, that looks good. So all I'm going to do is plot the column C data on the y-axis, the D data on the x-axis. Then I'm going to format my chart a little bit. So anytime you put something into Excel, just like with PowerPoint and Word, if you click on it, you get new tabs that pop up. And we can go to the chart design and select data. I can also just right click on my chart and go to select data from there. Either way works fine. So now I've got two different places that I can enter my data. I've got legend entries, that's my y-axis, my vertical. And then I've got my horizontal axis, that's my x-axis, that's horizontal. So I'm going to add a y-axis series. For this type of chart, you get a chance to enter the series name. For series name, that's where you'd want to choose a header, like a label for your data, not the data itself. When we insert a legend, whatever we have here will show up in the legend, whatever we inserted as the series name. So we want to make sure we understand how to do that. Not for all charts, but for this chart, you can enter the x-axis values right from the select data dialog, the edit series dialog box here. So I hit this up arrow. I said I was going to put D on the x-axis. Again, make sure your cursor is like in that last cell when you let go. And I'm going to hit the up arrow again for my series Y values, up arrow. If when I do that, this isn't highlighted in gray, if it's not highlighted in gray, I need to delete it because it'll try to add whatever I select to that equals 1. And I'm going to select for my y-axis. I wanted my data here in column C. All right, I see my plot. That looks about right. I start out my y values. I start out. So this flipped flopped my data, but column C, edit. All right. So you can always go back in and check. You can come in here and you can do edit, and then you can check the values for your series. Right, as you choose them, they'll be highlighted over here. Choose them over here. All right, good to go. So now my chart looks good. I'm not going to add anything else to it. If I needed to, I could edit this. Can always come and edit my x-axis. I can remove a series. If I uncheck this box next to it, it'll go away. So sometimes you've got multiple plots and maybe you don't want one to show up, but you don't necessarily want to delete it. You can just uncheck that box. Check it again, it comes right back. So now we just want to be able to format our chart. If I click on my chart, get this little plus sign here, it's my chart elements. I always want to add axis titles, a chart title, and if I'm plotting more than one thing, which I usually am, I'm going to include the legend. Now my legend, because I chose my series name, column C, has column C in there. What if I moved my data and this was now column E? I change it here. And because I use a cell reference, that automatically updates. I'm going to put a title in here. I'll just call this Excel 1. Column A. Column B. So chart title, I've got a legend and my legend is labeled. It's not, if you don't label it, it'll just show up series 1, 2, 3. But I put a name in for it, so it's labeled. Got an x-axis label, y-axis label. One other thing I want to do is I want to be able to fit my data to my axis. So here I've got nothing plotted from 20 to 25, so it's just wasted space. 20 to 25, just wasted space. I can put my cursor right over one of these numbers here on either axis, right click and go to Format Axis. I see my boundaries for that axis. I start at 0, I end at 25. So maximum and minimum boundaries here. I just want to change my maximum to 20. Everything else looks good. I can also, instead of right-clicking, I can just put my cursor right over my x-axis, double-click, my format axis will pop up. Got my boundaries 0 to 25. Just want 0 to 20. And these are the basics. We'll learn a little bit more. Some of our problems get a little more complicated, but this is the basics of what we're trying to master by the end of the semester for Excel. You want to be able to do calculations manually and with formulas using cell references. You want to be able to use fixed cell references in your autofill tool. And the idea is we're trying to do a lot of calculations very quickly and build a well-formatted chart. And if I click on my chart and I go in my chart design, I've got some of these pre-formatted layouts I can look at. For something like this, I could click here on try to make that a little easier to read. I could change the font size here for these. So just little things when you're playing around with this, make sure you're paying attention to the formatting of your chart. That's part of what I'll be looking for is when you turn it in, I'll look to see that you've properly constructed your chart. Then I'll look for chart title, X and Y axis label, legend, and that your legend is labeled, that your chart is properly constructed, that your data fits your axes, and that you understood how to format the chart. Make it look pretty. That's it for the Excel 1 assignment. What I always ask you to do is we've walked through this once together. Now close it down, reopen it, and walk through it once by yourself. So you walk through it once with me to kind of learn the tools and to see how it's done, and then you walk through it once yourself, try to get some mastery of working on this on your own. So let me know if you have any questions, and best of luck. Take care.